Welcome, everyone. We are so excited about today's broadcast. Today's episode is going to be with a very, very special guest, and we're going to tell you a little bit about him right after this. And welcome to this episode of New Thinking About Old Pain. We are the Ouch Doctors, Dr. Steve and Dr. Tim, and we're super excited about being here with you. Before we get into the content for today, we want to remind you that we are not your doctors and that we are not here to provide you with definitive medical advice specific to your needs. And so we always encourage you to make sure that you're in touch with your team of physicians and medical practitioners, and that you feel good about the care that you're receiving. So we're here to support you and provide some insight, but we take no responsibility for your health, and please take responsibility for your own health. We are also on YouTube, and we hope that if you're not watching us now on YouTube, that you pop on over there and you click that little red button in the bottom right-hand corner and join our page and become part of our community. And then you find out about all the upcoming shows that we've got. We've got about 40 of them in the can right now, and more coming. So please join us. And finally, we love your feedback. If there's anything that you'd like to share live or in replay, please do so, and we'll make sure that we respond to your comments and questions. And having said all that, Dr. Tim, would you like to share about our visitor?
I would, but I'm going to first let Dr. Dave in, and I'm thrilled to have Dr. David Hanscom with us here today. Dr. Dave is a orthopedic surgeon who specializes in spine surgery out on the left coast. Of course, we come from the right coast. He comes from the left coast. And he quit his practice a few years back, and I'm sure he's going to tell us about that. Wrote a book called Back in Control. And I could read all his bio, but I've just got to mention how I first heard about Dr. Hanscom. My elderly but brilliantly smart mother, who lives in Virginia, heard that I was having some significant back problems, which kept me from practicing my beloved profession of chiropractic about 8 years ago. And she called me up and she said, "Hey, I just heard of this guy, Dr. Hanscom, on this podcast," which I think was the People's Pharmacy down in Virginia. Right. "And I think it could help you." And I said, "Sure, yeah, right." And well, anyway, I wasn't getting better. I was laying on my floor. Nothing was getting better for me. And as a matter of fact, I had been recommended surgery to put a titanium cage in my spine, which I have not done, by the way, because 6 months later, I did in fact buy Dr. Hanscom's book, and my world was changed and my mind was opened. And I'm here for essentially as kind of an acolyte of Dr. David's, and we're so thrilled to have him on the show.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. I had no idea that was your story, but I'm excited that you had success. And you said no surgery?
No surgery.
And so I'm just curious if I could, before we start into this, was there 2 or 3 concepts out of the book that helped change your thinking about pain?
Well, it was really your insight into your own journey with anxiety. I never put the two together. I've told my patients, I took care of 250,000 chiropractic patients in 25 years. I got what I considered were good results. But on the back of my mind, I was always thinking, you know what, there's definitely some link between stress and my patients. But I never put 2 and 2 together when it came to my own situation. I never self-diagnosed myself, nor had anybody else, with anxiety or any kind of stress-related disorder. But in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that that was part of my issue. And so I think the biggest thing was hearing your story about anxiety and how it affected your practice, even though we're in different professions. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, this is me. And I definitely self-identified some of the psychological patterns. A perfectionist, somebody who's super hard on oneself. That's me. Still to this day, I'm still challenged with that. And of course, stress and anxiety, that I just keep it all in. Outwardly, everything's perfect. I'm the picture of health. I'm an athlete. As a matter of fact, 3 years before I wound up on the floor and had to quit my profession with back pain, I was on the summit of Mount Everest. I was
Wow.
a sponsored athlete
Wow.
with a full practice full of people. 3 years later, I'm on the floor and I can't move. And I
Right.
did not get better for a long time.
Excellent. Well, I'm not excellent for that, but that you're better. That's fantastic. So,
Yeah.
cool. So you know a lot about what I do. And it's a big topic, and I'm happy to sort of go where you want with this. I can, Steve, any thoughts from your perspective, would you like me to cover today?
Well, I also, in fact, I come primarily from the mindset side of things, because a lot of the work that I've done in the last several years has been around anxiety and around peak performance and around the self-identification that people have of who they think they are, which emotions they're willing to, and which emotions they're not willing to feel.
Right.
And so a lot of the work that I've done in terms of hypnosis and mindfulness for anxiety have sort of brought me around the back door into this whole world, once again, this whole world of back pain, having been a chiropractor myself. And so now beginning to see them coming together and
Right.
realizing that patients respond in a variety of ways when you start working with their minds, both physically and emotionally. And I want to hear your take on that. And then I think one of the things that Dr. Tim and I would love to talk about, because I think it's going to benefit those listening, but also us, which is, how do you help individuals grasp this when people are so indoctrinated into the traditional medical model of it being a physical problem?
Well, let me work backwards for a second. So instead of trying to cover the whole topic today, which can be sort of wordy and long and a little bit tedious, I just want to leave one concept out there: that anxiety is the pain, is a response to a threat, not the cause. And you were on one of our Wednesday night sessions, right, Steve? Were you both on?
Yes.
You know about the autonomic nervous system and how we think about things now.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that what's pain? It's just a signal that says danger. And what the neuroscience has shown for a long time is that threat causes a bodily reaction that creates symptoms. Every symptom we experience is caused by the body processing the environment. Like a Boeing jet has a computer that processes all the sensory input, like altitude, gas gauge, wing flap angles, etc.
Mhm.
You can fly the jet. Well, the jet has 2 million parts to it. The human body has 50 trillion cells, 80 billion brain cells. It's a lot more complicated than the jet. So I don't like the word mind body anymore. It's just a unit. I mean, your brain doesn't exist without the body to support it. And your body can't exist without the nervous system actually coordinating all these reactions, which are incredibly complicated. So when we call it the central nervous system, it really is just a central processing unit, but it's just a unit response to the environment. So what happens is that every living creature, from my one-cell bacteria to humans, gravitates towards safety and avoids danger. The species that did not pay attention to those cues didn't survive. When you're threatened, while your body takes action in adrenaline, cortisol, rapid heart rate, breathing, etc. But what I didn't know until I met Dr. Porges about a year ago is I forget about the autonomic nervous system. So in addition to your heart racing and the usual signs of threat, while your whole immune system fires up, and then when it's sustained, those inflammatory cells destroy your body. So it turns out that mental threats are processed the same way that a physical threat does. Humans have a problem called language. And so it turned out that thoughts and emotions create the same response. Unpleasant thoughts and emotions create the same response as a physical threat, with repressed thoughts and emotions being even worse. So every human being has this problem. So what happens, we have this sympathetic response or this reaction to the environment to defend ourselves. Humans just have a word for things that my cat doesn't, called anxiety. Just a word that we put on the sensation. And so anxiety is the result of the threat, not the cause. And we put anxiety in this concept of a psychological term. It is not. It's a physiological response to a threat. Now there's mental input. I call it mental threat, or you could call it the psyche if you wanted to, but I've gotten away from neuropsychology only because it's such a loaded word. So basically, it's mental threats versus physical threats. They're processed in the same way. Humans cannot escape their consciousness. I call it the curse of consciousness. Every human being has some level of sustained threat because you can't escape your thoughts. So as far as disease, there's two parts to it. there's the person's coping skills, and there's the environment. And in medicine, as you know, we're not given time to talk to our patients anymore. So I don't know your environment. I don't know who you are. I don't know your coping skills. So if somebody has a stomach ache and you treat them with medications, fine. But if they're going back to an abusive boss or an abusive relationship, that's the problem. And it's not psychological. It's just that this threat translates into changes in the autonomic nervous system, which affects the stomach function, and you have irritable bowel syndrome or spastic bladder or migraine headaches. So an unpleasant environment physiologically translates into physical symptoms. But if we all step back and think about this, which I'm upset about personally, I spent 15 years in chronic pain, there's a sort of like high school science class, right? I mean, under threat, your heart races, you have adrenaline and cortisol. And again, I forgot about the cytokines and the immune system. But every physical symptom that you have is created by your response to the environment. You cannot treat a person without understanding the whole person. So I don't like the term holistic medicine. I don't like the word integrated medicine, in that that's what medicine is. Anything less than that isn't medicine, whatever we want to call it. So we're treating symptoms instead of the root cause. So the root cause is the coping mechanism of the organism versus the environment he or she is in. That's the basic problem. So we're treating symptoms out in the periphery, which doesn't solve the root problem. And the reason I quit spine surgery is we're hurting people, especially in spine surgery, because only about 20% of spine surgery is successful for low back pain. There's not one research paper that says that it works. In 60 years, there's not one research paper that says that spine surgery works for back pain. And when you have the downside of a failed surgery, it's a disaster. So we all know that chronic pain is a solvable problem. People are told they have to manage it, just live the best you can live. And then, Tim, I don't know your whole story, but you know, you're living a different life.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
then I know that the mental pain is a much bigger threat than the physical pain. So if I give my patients the choice of getting rid of their leg pain or arm pain with surgery versus getting rid of the anxiety, guess what? They want to get rid of the anxiety. To sort of deal with the pain, physical pain. But again, anxiety just says danger, and anxiety is the pain. The final thing I'll say, which I want to leave your audience with really carefully here, is that this unconscious survival response, the sympathetic response that says danger, fires up the whole body. This unconscious brain processes about 20 million bits of information per second, 20 million. The conscious brain processes 40. 20 million versus 40. So this idea about mind over matter makes no sense. You also need the sensation we call anxiety to survive. Without anxiety, you wouldn't survive more than 2 minutes. You wouldn't protect yourself. It's a gift. So it's a moral gift. And the key issue here is you separate from it, and then your conscious brain can thrive. So there's a bunch of ways of doing that, which we may be able to cover a little bit in this show. But Tim, I have written a second edition of that book, by the way. That's the first edition published in 2012. Right. There's a second edition in 2016. I did write about, for people that are wanting spine surgery, we're considering it. There's over 1 million surgeries to be done a year right now in the US, and probably 70% of those should not be done. So I wrote a book called Do You Really Need Spine Surgery? But what I'm excited about, we just released an app in a sort of a package of services, which is a much clearer pathway out of pain. And we conservatively have well over 1,500 people that are pain-free. It's about a 90% self-directed process, but it's called the Doc Journey, THEDOC journey.com. And it's more of a straight line pathway with explanations along the way. And by understanding anxiety being physiological, not psychological, by understanding it's just your body signal that says danger and that you can't control it, you separate it and retrain your brain to go a different direction. Not positive thinking, but positive substitution is very, very consistent. And it happens within 4 to 6 weeks. People start to shift. Anyway, that was a long question.
Boy, I just took about 1.5 pages of notes over here. Lots of things came up for me thinking about Cellier and the general adaptive syndrome and how, that's what we're talking about. And I recently wrote a blog post called Psychomeostasis.
Okay.
Blending psych and homeostasis together, because that's what we're talking about, is having a steady state of mind,
right,
despite despite the chronic, despite the various things that appear in our environment. And so I'm curious about the coping mechanisms, because when somebody's environment is overwhelming them, that they don't seem to have the coping mechanisms, what are you going directly to that in the work that you're doing, is helping people with their coping mechanisms? Or what are some of the things when somebody comes to you with physical pain, and we know that there's mental pain underlying it, and the physical pain often is a distraction from the emotional pain, because I'd rather, as you said, feel the physical pain than the emotional pain. How are you peeling the layers of the onion, I guess, is my question.
Well, so what's different about this process is it's pretty generic. In other words, whether it's physical pain or mental pain, it doesn't really matter. The brain says dangerous, it says this is uncomfortable. And so the entire process is that we think in terms of stress being a psychological issue. It is not. It's just a threat. So again, what happens, but people forget, but when we talk about stress management, it's a huge misnomer, because the stress that is the most stressful and damaging is the stress you can't manage. You're trapped.
Right on.
And of course, chronic pain is a catch-22, because you're trapped in pain. Then your body chemistry is way off, which makes the pain worse. You double the nerve conduction, et cetera. So the key issue is, I call it the eye of the storm. If you just picture a hurricane spinning around with the wind representing your circumstances and your thoughts, both are a problem. So that you can't control most of your circumstances. You certainly cannot control your thoughts. What the strategies do, they pull you into the center. And so the world can spin around like it's going to spin. It'd be nice if it didn't spin as fast, but guess what? You can't control it. You can't stop a hurricane. You can't stop your thoughts. You can't control most of your circumstances. So again, with anxiety, the first step is to separate that reaction and watch it. Probably 80% of our mental pain comes from cognitive distortions. I'm not good enough. You label people. There's a should word. There's catastrophizing. Lots of our mental disasters come from our cognitive distortions. So becoming aware of those and reprocessing those is big. We also find out that simple things like slow breathing, humming, different relaxation exercises aren't psychological. You're directly stimulating the vagus nerve, which is parasympathetic and very strongly anti-inflammatory. So it helps my patients to know that, okay, if I do a little bit of humming, which stimulates the back of my throat, I'm vibrating the seventh nerve, which is close to the ninth vagus nerve, which is strongly anti-inflammatory. Slow breathing, very anti-inflammatory. I think you've heard me talk about this thing called expressive writing. Have you heard me talk about that, Tim? There's a book called
Write and Rip It Up. Write and Rip.
So, but it's over 1,000 research papers that documents that it works. 1,000. I never heard one word of this in medical school. These are much better research papers than anything else I've seen. And again, in spine surgery, not one paper, not one that says that spine surgery works, not one. So this is simple, it's self-directed. It drops viral load, it improves scholastic performance, it drops down liver function tests, it drops down kidney function, it doubles wound healing. It's crazy what this does. We don't know why. It's always the first step. It's called expressive writing. So we write things down and tear them up. Then there's different forms of it, but the data on this is really deep. This is one intervention starts changing things. So there's little things like active meditation and breathing, where they drop down inflammation, they improve nerve conduction. Your brain also gets inflamed with this constant threat. So in your nervous system, you have these glial cells that are throwing off these inflammatory cells that sensitize the brain. So again, these breathing exercises that are anti-inflammatory just drop it all down.
Dr. Dave, how important is it for the patient to buy in to all the exercises and the different avenues into this type of healing? Do they have to buy in? Do they have to I know about this. I've had, like Sarno used to talk about knowledge therapy, and that was his most important thing. He used to brag about people reading his book and getting better. But when you talk about the breathing and the write and the rip and journaling and such, is it important? Do they need to know what's going on? Do they need to buy in, or will they get better despite that?
So here's the thing. Okay, so you've been in chronic pain for 10 years. You've tried everything. You go to surgeons and physical therapists and chiropractors. By the way, chiropractors are a long ways ahead of the physicians, as you well know. I mean, the physical therapists and chiropractors have been ahead of the game for about at least 10 years. Medicine is way behind the game here. So I say, look, this is not about believing David Hanscom. It's not about believing the Doc Project. It's not about believing anything. So as one of my most successful patients pointed out, it's more about suspension of disbelief. In other words, okay, if you don't believe it, that's fine. Embrace that disbelief. So it's like learning how to play the piano. You may not want to play it, may not be very enjoyable, but you just practice the skills and start doing it. What happens, you don't have to believe it. You don't even have to understand it, because you also know when you're in chronic pain and anxious and frustrated, you can't think clearly. The blood supply changes to your brain. So the key issue, that's why the sequencing is so critical, is actually just start the tools, just the writing relaxation. You don't have to understand why. Things will shift relatively quickly. And then your brain starts to change. It's called neuroplasticity. As you know, your brain changes every second. So as your brain starts to change, you allow yourself to heal, things start to change. And there's a lot of people that are so angry and frustrated they can't break through. And it is about 90% self-directed. So if the patient doesn't want to engage, I've learned there's nothing I can do. But I've also learned I just say, hey, look, just go to work. Let's do some homework together. And the thing I always focus on first is sleep. If you're not sleeping, you don't cope very well, you don't understand very well. We also find out that lack of sleep actually causes chronic back pain. They did a big study out of Israel showing that lack of sleep actually induces chronic low back pain. They did not find the reverse causation. So I just say, look, embrace your disbelief. That's fine. And even at the end of the day, you still don't have to believe David Hanscom or the project. Everybody finds their own way out of this thing because it's very self-directed. The key issue is you eventually understand the problem. You use the tools that work for you, and you take control of your own life. And it's consistent. So the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, some type of engagement has to happen. The patient has to take responsibility at some level. But the first step is just do it.
So much of, like, I'm listening to you and I'm equating so much of what you're saying to mindfulness.
Right.
Finding the calm in the eye of the storm, which is a very Buddhist mindfulness kind of a model, and also this idea of the willing suspension of disbelief.
Right.
That I'm not looking for converts. I'm looking for you to follow a path. I went from here to here. I ended up over here. I have a roadmap to get there.
Right.
Get on the road, and as long as you stay on the same road, you're likely to get there too.
Or a different road, just end in the same direction, right?
Kind of the same, exactly, going the right way instead of
right.
wrong.
In the right direction. And it's been, hundreds and hundreds of patients have gone to pain-free. When I say that means you have the tools to cope with pain, but you're not trapped by anxiety. You're not trapped by anger. The pain comes and goes. It doesn't run your life like it used to. And the exciting part for me is that once you start processing anxiety and anger, again, it's 20 million bits of information per second compared to 40. Once you de-energize that process, people thrive at a level that they never knew existed before, including myself. So I was a perfectionistic, self-critical, reactive my entire life. And I thought I was living a good life, but I was trapped by running away from my anxiety. So I went from being a major spine surgeon to bring it on to a panic attack in one day. I didn't know what happened. So I thought it was psychological. It turns out suppressed emotions create this massive chemical reaction. And what a panic attack is basically a dysregulated autonomic nervous system. It's not a psychological process. It's just your body explodes. So heart racing, sweating, almost passing out, that's a panic attack, as you all know. Those are physiological changes. I just have to rant for 1 second here, and I know I'm ranting a little bit anyway, but people with chronic pain are told there's no cure, right? They told you have to live with it, just do the best you can do. And they get labeled as drug seekers, malingers, you're not really hurting, you're a wimp, etc. Lots of labels, right? Nobody likes to be labeled. So the most recent label that medical profession has come up with is called medically unexplained symptoms. Have you heard of this term yet by chance? MUS?
Yeah.
Your whole body's full of inflammatory cells. Your brain sensitized, you've doubled the nerve conduction, your entire body's hypervigilant on fire, everything's wrong with it. And 99% of physical symptoms are wrought by physiological changes. So your body's physiology is way off, is sustained. It's like driving your car down the freeway in second gear, it's going to break down. And it's been incredibly well documented that people under chronic stress die on the average 7 years earlier. They have double heart disease, anxiety, depression, suicide. They have hypertension. They have all sorts of chronic diseases, autoimmune disorders. There's a 40% higher chance of having an autoimmune disorder if you're under chronic stress. Cancer, same thing. Your immune system's compromised. You don't fight off the cancer cells.
Yeah.
So if you have cancer and die, is that psychological? Is that imaginary? No, you're dead. I mean, it's not subtle. So again, stress is your body's total response to the environment. And you have all these sensors, like an airplane. You have your touch, feel, vision, taste, smell. All these sensors are coming in, and your body is designed to keep us at homeostasis, as you well know. We stay in this neutral zone, and if we feel discomfort, it means we've exceeded the safe level for that structure. Whereas I'm not going to stare into that bright light because it hurts it. It's going to damage my eyes. So my brain automatically keeps me away from that light. Mm-hmm. So that's the brilliance and the genius and sort of the magic of the nervous system. It just does everything automatically. So honoring that nervous system is a really big deal. And again, these physicals, I mean, autoimmune disorders. I mean, how horribly disabling are those? They don't just happen. Something's causing it, and it's sustained exposure to threat.
Have you seen reversal of any of the of those sort of disorders as well?
Yep. I mean, I can't reverse the structural changes, but we have one woman at our roundtable who's a physician, and she had ankylosing spondylitis, which is a very disabling back problem, as you both well know. Sure. And she went through a very dramatic process similar to the doc journey. She's on the doc journey now, but she went through her own version of it in her own way. Mm-hmm. And she developed deep compassion for a person she really disliked every time, and she's fine. No more pain. I mean, the structural changes from the arthritis are still there. She couldn't reverse those, but no more pain. She's a competitive weightlifter. Mm-hmm. And every person that gets better to the person, it's always crossing this anger dividing line. Because anxiety, remember we put the sensation called anxiety on this sympathetic response. The antidote to that sensation is control. Remember, anxiety is intended to be so unpleasant that it forces you to take action to survive. When you can't escape that threat, your body secretes more stress chemicals and you become angry. So anger and anxiety are the same thing. Every person that gets better to the person is always crossing the anger dividing line every time.
Could you say more about that when you say they cross the line? Is that just the willingness to express it, or the willingness to notice that they have it, or how are they coming up against their own anger?
Well, first of all, the research shows that 90% of people in chronic pain are still angry at their parents, their childhood, the person who injured them, their employer, their boss. They're angry. And again, mental threats are processed the same way as a physical threat. So now you have a person you strongly dislike running your life, and that person who you dislike is actually going to kill you because of the ongoing stress reaction. So when I say forgiveness or anger, it's a processing. It's a process. There's three parts. There's the actual reaction, elevated nervous system, inflammatory cells, etc. So breathing mindfulness is drop your shoulders, relax a little bit. It just drops down the chemical reaction. So there's the output. Then the nervous system itself is part of it, where you have a certain amount of coping mechanisms that are high or low. So if you have low coping mechanisms and you're angry, your nervous system is sensitized and you get more physical symptoms. But you can't give up anger unless you understand how to be vulnerable, because anger keeps you safe. Right. Remember, the antidote to anxiety is control. When you lose control, it's your body's last-ditch effort to regain control. So anger keeps you safe. So you actually cannot give up anger until you learn how to be vulnerable. And that's the biggest block. Then forgiveness changes the input. Okay, so somebody injured me 20 years ago. Why should they ruin my day-to-day? So forgiveness is a learned skill. It's a process. There's a book called Forgive for Good that Dr. Luskin wrote out of Stanford. He's a friend of mine. And he's the one that taught me that, every day you get upset about something. It's normal. Just like anxiety is necessary to stay alive, so is anger. Mm-hmm. So this forgiveness is an ongoing dynamic process. It's not like one and done. Every time you think about that person or situation that injured you, guess what? You're going to react. If you suppress your reaction, of course, that's a problem, right? So anger is anger. It's okay to be angry. but you have to be aware that you are angry. Perfectionism, right? Remember, anger is circumstance, blame, victim, anger. So with perfectionism, you're always less than perfect. You blame yourself or the situation for being less than perfect. You're always a victim of less than perfect, and you're always agitated. So that's the most common form of anger to process is perfectionism. And of course, being a spine surgeon, it was that perfectionism that quote made me successful, but I got sick. I had 17 different physical symptoms at the worst part of my ordeal. I was in chronic pain for 15 years. I had over 17 different physical and mental symptoms. I didn't ask for it. I did not know what happened. Nobody could explain it to me. People with chronic pain lose hope. Research also shows that a sense of hope and optimism is a major factor in dropping down your inflammatory response. And so I had no hope. Most of my pain patients have no hope. So that's what drives me in this process of going from what I call the abyss of pain to not only coming out of the hole, but thriving at a level they never knew existed has been incredibly rewarding. So it's been a remarkable journey for me. I'm not that happy about it still that I went through it. I'm just not. But
so, Dr. Dave,
that,
well, so you say that, was it 70% of back surgeries were unnecessary in your opinion? Is that what you said, 70 or 80?
Maybe more, 70, 80%.
I gotcha. What do your colleagues say about this? And what do they say, specifically spine surgeons, about you not playing on the same team anymore?
Yeah, no, I get attacked pretty routinely. Some people, I mean, of course, it's never. I mean, surgeons aren't bad people. I don't want to necessarily demonize the surgeon, but because I was that way. I mean, that's the way I was.
Sure.
I felt guilty if I couldn't find a reason to do the surgery because you're suffering. I want to help you out, but we're not trained to do it correctly. We have no idea what chronic pain is. None of this is taught in medical school at all. And so, yeah, it's not been widely embraced by the surgeons or by medicine in general. Again, I've had much more reception from primary care, internists, chiropractors, physical therapists, social workers, even psychologists are somewhat resistant to this.
Sure.
Again, but I'm just blown away this last year on this Dr. Porter's roundtable. There are hundreds, probably thousands of research papers documenting what the problem is. But there's a paper out of Baltimore that shows that only 10% of surgeons are actually addressing these risk factors before they do surgery. 10%. So my thing that drives me even more is that about 7 or 8 years ago, there's about maybe 700,000, maybe 600,000 surgeries done a year, spine surgery done a year in the United States. I looked it up this week. There's now over 1.2 million. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So instead of taking advantage of what we know about chronic pain now, which is well documented. By the way, everything in my book is well documented research. My mantra for a long time has been just implement what we know. Just structured, organize a way of presenting known effective medical treatments. And so it's about 90% self-directed. My hospital system did not care for me very much because it generates no revenue. We had people with 20, 30, 40 years of pain come out of the system completely, probably costing maybe $500 to $2,000 total. I had one gentleman who his medication bill alone was $25,000 a month. A wheelchair, attendance, the whole thing. And I'm not saying it was easy, but over about 2 years, came off almost all his medications, get out of the electric wheelchair, no full-time attendant, and went back to consulting.
Let me ask you something. The process by which people are receiving these results is almost exclusively the self-directed program, or is there any psychology or any therapy visits or anything on top of that? This is all introspective work, mindfulness, self-awareness kind of work.
Yep.
Powerful.
Now, I like psychologists. So here's the deal. So let's say in your practice, what the process does allows the responsibility to go to the patient, so that when they see you, the physical therapist, you're not responsible for their pain. They are. It allows them to do your job really well. They take responsibility. And then it's again a whole other topic. I give lectures on how to enjoy treating chronic pain, but it allows a practitioner to create an environment that's just very soothing and relaxing, which helps a healing process, right? Which you both do. I know that. But now that I know about the connection with the autonomic nervous system and how that calming activity isn't, quote, psychological, but it's directly anti-inflammatory, it is very powerful for the patient to know, okay, I'm doing this because of this. So I like psychologists if they can help people move forward. We found out just talking about the pain doesn't really help. And so, yeah, what the practitioners can do is provide wisdom, guidance, support, cheerleading, whatever you want to call it. So the practitioner is a huge part of it. So at the end of the day, by the way, again, you don't have to believe David Hanscom or even the doc process, but I will say that the practitioner-patient relationship is still number one. Remember, it's safety versus threat. If the problem is ongoing threat, the essence of the solution is safety. That has to happen in the doctor's office. It doesn't start there. Where does the safety start? So, no, I think the patient-doctor relationship is absolutely key.
But quite often it's the opposite. It's that feeling of threat. Going to the doctor's office is a threat, especially if there's that subtext of like, my doctor thinks that I'm malingering. My doctor thinks that there's nothing to this. My doctor thinks that I'm weak. Just creating an environment. And this is, both Dr. Tim and I, for years in chiropractic, that was one of the distinctions of our practice, was to create a safe space, to make people feel like they're not crazy. And we're going to nurture you through this process.
Right.
I'm curious, what was a turning point for you? When did you first get onto the fact that there was something to this approach?
First of all, I got better. I still don't know how I got sick and how I got better. I just didn't know. And then in 2006, I started sharing some tools with patients, and most things I shared didn't work. The people started getting better. And I didn't know the expressive writing was critical. I knew relaxation was critical. I didn't know about anger and forgiveness for a long time. And then in 2009, I heard a lecture by Dr. Howard Schubner out of Detroit that explained how this mental threat translates into physical symptoms. And at the time, I was having 17 different symptoms. And I go, wait a second, this sounds like what I'm have going on. So that was a turning point in 2009. Then the last 5 years of neuroscience research, particularly the last year, has been stunning at how clear the answers are. It's just stunning. And so I was seeing so many people being damaged by spine surgery and so many people getting better with just simple tools. That's why I quit. I was seeing 3 to 5 patients every week having surgery that they didn't need to have done. And it's just, and plus we're doing bigger operations more frequently with less workup. There's lots of reasons for that. But just get to the point, I felt like that I had to do what I could do to try to change this tide. Maybe I can, maybe I can't, but I'm going to try. So I'm here. See what happens.
And what do you think? Is there one thing that would change the paradigm? I mean, I just get frustrated because more people don't get us, or people don't get the big picture, and they're minimally aware. And what will it take to have a paradigm change?
That's when my one message I still want to give to the audience, that this sympathetic response to a threat is the problem. That's it. I mean, once you understand, forget about the words anxiety, and we can use anxiety as a bridge word. Once you understand that you cannot treat the human organism in isolation, you just can't do it. That's why I don't like the word integrated or holistic medicine, because that is medicine. So once you understand that this body creates symptoms in response to the environment, there's lots of ways of addressing that. I mean, I think you could flat out solve healthcare crises by tripling or quadrupling the reimbursement you take to talk to the patient, period. So we're doing a spine surgery costs about $100,000 per surgery. Everything you read in the literature, about a third get better, about a third do the same, and a third get worse. That's a lot of money being spent for really bad outcomes. This circumstance, if they're willing to suspend disbelief, move through the process, I don't care if it's 1 month, 6 months, or a year or two, they will get better. It's very consistent because it's well-established treatments. They have to find their own version of it. Some people are more open than others, but it's just the way the brain works. There's no magic about my book, but it's organized and it's structured, so it allows you to sort of systematically tackle the problem.
I have a question just out of personal curiosity, because one of the things that I do is hypnosis, and I've had great success with back pain. I'm curious what your thought is about that, and also what you view to be the mechanism.
Yep. No, again, as a surgeon, I thought that was just craziness, but no, it's absolutely dead on. You're lowering the body's inflammatory response. It's powerful. Different heart rate variability monitors, biofeedback, medical hypnosis. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. EMDR, acceptance commitment therapy. I mean, all these things have been documented to work. The trouble is you're not covered by insurance.
Right, none of it.
So as a practitioner, I had all these things I could do for people that I knew would work, and I just had to fight like crazy to get the simplest treatments done. But I could sign somebody for this major 10-hour surgery in a heartbeat. So anyway, so just in general, I mean, the new process is called the Doc Journey, the docjourney.com.
What does DOC stand for?
Direct your own care.
Nice.
And the book, the second edition of my book is Back in Control, A Surgeon's Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain. The book on Do You Really Need Spine Surgery is a very quick read. It puts a person into 1 of 4 quadrants. You can make a very clear decision whether you should or should not undergo surgery. I mean, I'm not against surgery at all. I'm a spine surgeon. And then, but I'm excited about the Doc Journey because it sort of represents the evolution of just understanding lots of things that didn't work, but reflects the pathway of people that have had lots of success with the process. So that's what I'm excited about now.
Well, we'll post the link so that our viewers can explore that. And I think it's a great thing. I mean, you're really giving people the opportunity to kind of get the roadmap. Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited that you guys are interested. Tim, I'm ecstatic you did better. I mean, that's why I do this, right?
It's
yeah. The changes aren't subtle. I mean, I'm a living proof of that myself. I mean, my life's totally different. So the bottom line, your anxiety drops, right?
Right.
Yeah. Big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, huge difference. And you're just kind of more aware. I've found that I'm more aware of just the ebb and flow and the balance and accepting of the highs and lows that come in life, and the homeostasis of just and being and having gratitude for all that. Absolutely. That one shift was huge for me.
Yep. Lots of things going on. But anyway, I'm excited to be on the show. I appreciate it. And I would be happy to be on again. There's a whole bunch of other topics we haven't even touched on yet, but this was wonderful.
This has been great.
Yeah. And thanks so much, Dave. And I'd love to hear about like nutrition at some point too. I've heard that you do, the problems with the whole standard American diet and getting into a more anti-inflammatory diet and what your recommendations were. But let's do that at a different time. We've gone for, you got a hard stop. So
you have a hard stop. So anyway, thank you very much again. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
Right. And then I'm going to let's see if I can, there we go. Hey, that was amazing. And so we're still alive, and what a treat to have the great Dr. David Hanscom join us, and what a knowledge he has, huh? And
fascinating. Fascinating. What
is like looking at the modalities, the methodologies that have been most effective from his perspective, from a person who's like really in the trenches of this, have been the things that we've been saying for a long, long time. Right. I mean, in terms of feeling validated, mindfulness, self-awareness, reduction, maintaining balance, both physical and mental balance, and not allowing yourself to think that this is all just a physical thing.
Right. And what I was fascinated by is also, and I had this feeling like, he doesn't want to concentrate on the word pain and the label anxiety and the label stress, because you're putting it into the medical model, and then there's all kinds of stories that we all tell each other about that. And we should get it away from that. It's just a response to the environment, and we can change our response to the environment and not fall into that, and not medicalize it and all the stories that entails. So
I love that. When we first start talking about diagnoses, for example, I've got this. So you've got this symptom, and this symptom, and therefore it's this. And so basically medicine's concept of healthcare is to quote unquote diagnose, which basically means translating this constellation of symptoms into Latin. And now, well, the reason I have inflammation in my joint is because I've got arthritis. Well, what is arthritis? Inflammation of the joint. It's circular logic. You haven't learned anything new. You've just got a new language for it. And so in the same way, when we talk about our emotions or stress in general, it's a word, and we just throw a lot of stuff at that word. But the real work comes from, okay, the word might be giving us permission to look at that side of the issue. It's like, it's not physical, it's emotional. So let's look at the emotion. So the emotion is stress, or the emotion is anxiety, or the emotion is anger. Yeah, but just having a name for it is the booby prize.
Yeah.
Right. Let's go deeper. Let's also see, let's try it on. Let's feel it. Let's imbibe it. Let's, let's embody the experience. And I don't care what you call it. You call it Bob.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we should call it Bob.
Let's call it Bob from now on. Chronic Bob. So, guys, it's been such a pleasure being here, and I'm blown away. What an incredible opportunity this has been. So, until next week, train your brain.
Lose your pain.
We'll see you guys later.